Well, I couldn't speak for them, but I think I've heard that Robbie would like to do one of his own, predominantly guitar thing. But of course, this is something I don't know about. It's in his head.
Yeah.
And John has always been, I think, basically he likes jazz, and I would suspect he might produce and play in a jazz album of his own. The two of them, Robbie and John, a couple of years ago, produced an album with some friends of theirs called A Comfortable Chair. I don't know if you ever heard it.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah, they produced that album.
Yeah,
so
right.
they're both got an ear for producing.
How about yourself? Do you have a film project?
I guess that's what I've always really wanted to do, even more than being in a band, was to work in films. And I'd like to write and direct a film of my own.
You haven't written?
Well, it's all in my head.
Uh-huh.
But I do, I have a film I made, which hasn't been seen very much. Maybe you ought to see it sometime.
Would you see something?
It's called Highway, H-W-Y.
I heard about it, yeah. That was included was it included in that festival of films of yours up in Canada?
Right.
Uh-huh. How did it go over?
It was for a now defunct music magazine called Poppin' in Vancouver.
Yeah.
It was a benefit to try and keep them going, and the reports I got back was that Highway was very enthusiastically receed.
Was it also shown at the film festival
in Vancouver? Well, Feast of Friends was a year or so ago.
Yeah.
It met with a lot of booze.
Do you think that was because, was that the same reaction as had been met by, say, in LA?
I think they were probably reacting to personalities rather than a film, because it was a film. And Highway was entered in the San Francisco Film Festival, but it was rejected for whatever reason. I don't know. They didn't show it.
Do you think the reaction in San Francisco was like sort of a regional chauvinism, or?
I don't know. Do you think that really exists or not? I've wondered about that.
It probably did a year and a half ago.
Could
sure.
be.
You're definitely a Los Angeles person.
Citizen of LA. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that could be. But it's a 50-minute film. It's 35 millimeter and some color.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Is it more of you and the group, or
no? It's
different?
It's a fiction thing. I act in it, and I made it with some friends of mine. But I don't think it has much commercial appeal. I would like people to see it, though. It was more of an exercise for me, kind of a warm-up for something bigger.
It doesn't have enough action in it, I think.
It's more poetic, It's not. There's no story or anything.
You were saying that you might not do concerts until after a couple of albums, or may not even do any concerts at all after the albums. You were talking about projects. How then do you perceive your audience? How do you know that you're making the right kind of connections, or is that important? Where in concerts you know the reactions to each song right after you've done it, or any particular step you want to take, like your theatrics when you did that, you tell right away that this was the reaction.
Well, I guess it depends on what audience you want to play for, because probably since, a few years ago, we were probably right on for the age of people that go to large concerts, whereas now we might appeal to an older audience, maybe still the Fillmore crowds. They might still enjoy it.
Yeah.
But I would say it would be an anachronism for the younger people. Things change so fast, we're probably just too old-fashioned for the new kids coming along.
do you think you would be counted among those that would signify what some people insist on calling the death of rock and roll? I mean, would your trial, that whole thing you went through, your falling star, would that count along with Manson and with the Beatles breakup and with Dylan's New Morning?
Well, I was saying rock was dead years ago. I think probably it was not. See, what rock means to me is, for example, at one period, 20 or 30 years ago, jazz was the kind of music people went to in large crowds to dance to and move around to.
Mm-hmm.
And then rock and roll replaced that, and then another generation came along and they called it rock. And then
when you say jazz, you're talking about the Benny Goodman era, big time swing bands and boogie woogie,
right?
As opposed to the really smaller.
Right, and what happens when they fell out of popularity, they became more introverted and started communicating just with the musicians, so they had their own standards, which they felt no one was really able to comprehend.
Yeah.
Well, that's, what we call rock. The new generation of kids will come along in a few years, will swarm together, and they'll have a new name for it.
Yeah,
it'll be the same. It'll be just the kind of music that people like to go out and get it on to.
I don't know, because back in the boogie woogie days, or the 30s or 40s or the 50s, the music didn't generate, or didn't become a symbol of a whole new culture or a subculture or a generation. Whereas now the audience seems to be much more than an audience. It's a whole real way of life and approach to living.
But each generation wants new symbols, new people, and new names for what they want to divorce themselves from the preceding generation. So they won't call it rock. They'll invent some new name for it. Don't you think?
How important is poetry to you now? Are you still working on pieces?
Yeah, actually, this book is more of a collection of aphorisms and notes.
Mm-hmm.
There are only 5 or 6 really solid traditional poems in it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't consider that my career as a poet has really even begun yet.
Mm-hmm. Are these just thoughts you jot down on paper bags?
Yeah, keeping notebooks, and then at the end of a few years you sit down and kind of pick the good ones out.
Mm-hmm. Why have you gotten fat, Jim? That's the question we're discussing.
How
have you managed to get so hefty?
He says he's fat.
Yeah, you filled out a little bit.
Yeah.
Oh, sure, I'm not complaining. Yeah. Is there some poetic reason for that?
Let's see. I guess it's just a natural aging process.
Uh-huh. That's what you say.
Well,
Some people get either real sluggish because of aging,
yeah.
static, or they keep running around a lot and stay busy. And
Maybe it's not being as physically active, but I think it's mainly just just filling out.
Yeah.
Some people have that kind of build.
Yeah. Does touring and running around doing that kind of thing, does that make you lose a lot of weight?
Yeah, I would. I drink a lot of beer.
You still do? Yeah, I suppose you are.
Well, when I'm recording, especially, because if you drink hard liquor when you're recording, pretty soon you're so out of it you can't do anything anymore. But beer, it gives you a little energy and you can keep going all night. And beer is really puts on the pounds.
Are you? How's the recording coming along? Are you pushing for a particular date to finish it up, or is it very slow?
No, actually, this is probably, since the first album, this is probably the fastest one we've ever done.
Mm-hmm. I hope it works out.
Oh, it sounds great. I heard some of the stuff today, and it sounds great.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not, I think, probably finish it up by the end of the month.
What grounds were you talking about the possibility of that case breaking?
I thought it might become just like a basic American issue of freedom of speech and the right of anyone with a personal viewpoint to state their ideas in public and receive a hearing without legal pressure being put on them. But it turned out that
You're talking about free speech in the domain of the artist's expression,
yeah,
as opposed to, say, what the Chicago 8.
yeah, right. This, in fact, my lawyer made a brilliant speech partway through the trial in which he traced the origin of freedom of speech, and which goes side by side with the origin of drama, actually. The right of a dramatist to, or an artist to state his views without coming under legal pressure. And it was a brilliant summary of that historical process, but it didn't have any effect on the outcome at all. He stated cases just recently in Texas where some people put on even street theater, 5 or 6 people in a public thoroughfare. I mean, not in the middle of the street, on a sidewalk or somewhere. They put on a show, an anti-war thing or something, and they were arrested, but they got off.